You're listening to The Range, Gardner-Webb University streaming and on-demand radio. My name is Jeff. Glad to be with you and glad to have Dr. Amato back in the studio with us.
Woo!
We took the long holiday break, etc., but we're back to think about things political, particularly surrounding the presidency and the federal government, Supreme Court, etc. As we sat here on a Thursday to record this, it is the last full day of the Obama administration. Talk about that. When, Dr. Amato, is it that magical transfer of power actually takes place?
Absolutely. Well, this is set in the Constitution, so there's absolutely no ambiguity about that transfer of power. And it happens on Friday at noon. So Obama's administration ends precisely at 11:59 and 59 seconds.
59 seconds. Okay. That is precise.
It is. It's very, very precise. Largely so there are absolutely no ambiguities. And then at that moment that the clock ticks upright to noon, Trump will become our 45th president. There we go.
Yes. I had a conversation yesterday with Dr. Carey from the Communication Studies Department, and I said 46. I have been corrected. He will be the 45th president.
45th, yes.
So the inauguration, if you look back at it, it's always been pretty much always been a big celebration.
Yeah, it always has been. It has always been a kind of celebratory or an august moment or an austere moment, austere in that kind of, very formal. So it has varied in its tone. George Washington, for example, had a much more sort of august, like we're going to have a formal sort of, ceremony. And that in part was, I think, a strategy to increase the majesty of the fledgling nation. By the time Andrew Jackson rolls into office, that is
it was a party.
Food. There were animals all over the place. Like there are lots of historical records of goats wandering around in the White House. I mean, it was a party.
He was a man of the people.
He sure was. So they changed in tone over the years, and also they've even reflect the times. So during like the Great Depression or things like that, there was a lot of pullback on the celebration to kind of reflect, the times that we're going through.
I understand Woodrow Wilson did away with the parties afterwards, the balls and things of that nature, because they just did not want it. It just needed to be more somber.
Right. Yeah. And see, that's always this tension, right? What is going to be the appropriate tone of this event? Is it going to be high-minded? Is it going to be this, transfer of power? I mean, Woodrow Wilson was a professor. He probably wasn't light on his feet. And
That's a good point, yes.
And he was probably thinking things had gotten just a little too flashy and jazzy. Plus, World War I was about to kick into gear too. So that, it kind of always is this tension. How are we going to do this? And there's a lot of flexibility and a lot of role models in American history for that. Obama, for example, in his last two inaugurations have been these very large celebratory events. There have been many, many balls. I think he had as many as 10 official inauguration balls. I mean, just numerous celebrations. In contrast, Trump is only going to have 3 inaugural balls. And part of that is by design. I believe what Trump wants to signal is a kind of pulling back on the focus from the president himself. He's said things that, what he wants to do is get to business. But part of that also is, I think, a desire to bring down the kind of out of touch, perhaps, perception of the presidency. I think he's trying to go for more of that man of the people a persona.
Well, Jimmy Carter did some of the same
Absolutely.
thing. He talked about how he wanted to end the imperial presidency.
Right. So he also, I think, I'm not sure there were goats wandering around the White House, but I think he brought
Billy Carter probably.
Billy Carter sure did. And I'm sure there was a distinctly sort of Georgian flair to the whole thing.
Yeah. One of the things you talk about how Donald Trump wants to push out this image of getting right to work.
Right.
I read that originally he wanted to personally skip any of the balls, go straight to the Oval Office and start signing things.
Yes.
And he has been talked out of that.
Yes.
And he will attend the balls, but then he will go and start signing things.
And I I think ultimately that was wise. Whatever signal he wants to send, the thing is, there really should be a moment of celebration. There really should be this moment in which the American people recognize that this kind of, we've had this moment. We've got our president now, and the president should probably attend his own parties.
Yes. There's a lot of talk about the protests that will take place. That's nothing new.
No, it's not. We've had these before. Protests happen regularly throughout American history. I mean, this is one of the glories of being an American. You get to protest. And to some extent in D.C., it's, well, we're going to set up some barricades. We're going to set up some distance. We're going to make sure that there's a police force here. We're going to try and make sure nothing turns violent. These are very sort of routine matters in which we have protesters. And it has, I think, happened. I think there were some protests in 2000.
Yeah, they were.
For obviously Bush's election, or his, I should say, inauguration, largely for some of the same reasons. He also did not come into office with the popular vote, but he did win the Electoral College.
Yes, and all the court cases and the hanging
Yes.
chads and all that was around it. So, yeah, there was a lot of protest around that one as well. The biggest protest that I'm hearing about will be the Million Woman March.
Right. Yeah.
They always say million, whether they get that number or not.
Absolutely. It sounds good, right? I mean, we'll find out later on. There were 300,000 or something of that nature, but a Million Woman March sounds really good. Million Man March has better alliteration, though.
Yeah.
But yes, this will be taking place the day after the inauguration, and it is quite an event with lots of different women's organizations and groups coming together to protest what they believe will be a administration hostile to women and to women's rights.
Yeah. So it's going to be interesting to watch this, and of course there'll be plenty of news coverage of all these events taking place live tomorrow.
We'll be able to stream it somewhere.
Yeah, I'm sure. Twitter or Facebook or one of those will be streaming live, and all the cable channels will have coverage of it, etc. So lots of opportunities to witness.
Right. It's always a good moment. In fact, several of my students, or Gardner-Webb students, I should say, are attending the inauguration. And I remember talking to one of them who was a little like, well, I'm not that enthusiastic about Trump. But I was like, so what? Go.
Exactly.
It's inauguration. It's seeing, we've only ever had, 45 presidents. The United States is 200 some odd years old. Go. However you feel about the president, personally, it's about the office itself.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's true, though there are some members of the House of Representatives who might disagree with that.
This is true, but they're congressmen. They have the luxury. They go to Congress every day. And it is interesting to note that there's, I think, going to be about 60 Democrats who will be sitting the inauguration out. And as you note, they are all members of the House. The Senate is too tight. No Democratic senator wants to risk alienating any voters or anyone in there, because even though Republicans have a majority in the Senate, Democrats do not want to imperil any of their bargaining power in the Senate. So all of the members of the House who are protesting, they're coming from safe districts.
Gotcha.
Basically, they could, do whatever, and they will still get reelected in their districts.
Interesting to put it in that context. We've been witnessing over the last several weeks the process of transition. It takes place at that tick of the clock.
Exactly, that exact moment.
But a lot of work goes into it beforehand.
A lot of planning.
So what are we to note or glean from the cabinet nominees that Trump has put forth?
Well, things are not always going as smoothly as one wants. And it is interesting to note that this is one reason why the new Congress is already in place. That happened several weeks ago, and that is also by design to hopefully ease the transition so that Congress will already start looking over nominees. And the Senate's already been doing this. They've been holding hearings on various cabinet positions, various other positions. So hopefully, ideally, that once, that magical moment happens tomorrow, Trump will already have some of his cabinet members in place. I don't think actually any of them have been confirmed.
I don't think there have been any actual votes.
No, I don't think there's been any actual, but there's been a lot of hearings, a lot of things are coming in place. Trump will, of course, have his personal staff and other people who do not need Senate confirmation surrounding him tomorrow. So he won't be just hanging out in the White House with nothing to do.
One would think that the confirmation process would go pretty rapidly, considering the Republicans control both houses.
Right. And I think it actually will. There's been a lot of articles about this that have been coming out, and my critique of some of these articles and news pieces that I've read is they're trying to make it look more contentious than I think it will be. I do think there will be potentially some fights over some of these nominees, but for the most part, what Republicans are going to do is they're going to rubber stamp. They might ask some good, tough questions because they are also thinking about re-election, or they are also thinking about their chances of running for office. Mm-hmm. So they want to strike that appropriate balance of I'm being hard and fair and I'm carrying and upholding values of honesty and integrity and whatnot. But for the most part, we should see Trump's nominees go through pretty smoothly.
I think the Democrats who are on these committees, even though they're in the minority, can use it as an opportunity to sort of stake out position
Absolutely.
For leadership in the Democratic Party. I've seen Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders both pretty prominent in asking these pointed questions.
Absolutely, and that's precisely what they're doing. One thing we could talk about is the Democratic Party does have a bit of a leadership problem right now, right? And so Congress, or Democrats within Congress, are looking amongst themselves to kind of rise to that prominence, and they are staking out positions. They are going to ask, harder questions, and to some extent, what they're doing is they may know that they can't thwart the nominee, but they can have that soundbite, right? They can send that out to potential supporters. That will be on their, permanent record when they are trying to seek potentially positions within Congress, leadership within Congress, and also always keeping that eye to running for the Oval Office, because that's 4 years around the corner. It's never too soon to think about running for president.
If the past is any indicator, somebody will be running within the next 2 years.
Yes, absolutely. It'll become very clear.
Maybe not formally, but they will be running.
They will already be thinking about it, and they are, right? Because it's not actually right now immediately obvious, if you think about it, who is a clear-cut candidate to run in 4 years for the Democratic nominee. They've got a bit of a short sheet, and they do need to have some of their members rise up to the occasion. And this is a good opportunity to kind of cut their teeth, show that they were tough, and to make those positions known.
Well, one of the things that I think the Democratic Party is going to have to deal with going forward is this, it's not been reported on heavily, but it is out there. It's this idea that over the last 8 years, Democrats have lost nationwide about 1,000 elected positions.
All across various levels of government, state and local. And to some extent, that hasn't gotten a lot of attention because they've held the White House. And when you hold the White House, that's the real focal point of our federal government. And so people don't think about it, but that's why they've got this leadership deficit, is they do not have a feeder system. And that's actually what a lot of state and local positions are. They are feeder systems. If you show that you're a prominent person just simply in the, say, the North Carolina Senate or legislature, this gives you a ground to then maybe seek that federal office. That gets you a position to seek, the governorship, right? And those governorships are nice springboards to federal office as well. So they have a real problem. They have not been able to build up a bench.
Yeah. That's definitely, I think, something that the Democratic Party is going to have to address, is what's going on there, what is causing this erosion of positions.
Yeah, because it becomes a cycle, right? If you can't build up the talent beneath, because politics is like anything. You need skill, and you get that skill through experience. And hanging out in a state legislature for several terms is a great way to cut your teeth on politics.
All right. Well, a lot of things going on, a lot of things to look forward to. Next week, when you come back into the studio to record, I thought what we might do is sort of do an overview of the Obama legacy, the Obama years. What did he promise coming into office, and what did he or didn't he deliver in those 8 years in office? So that's what we'll talk about next time.
Good, a good evaluation.
And there probably will be some interesting things to talk about with the new
I'm
presidency as well.
sure Trump will tweet something
He'll tweet
between
something out
now
there.
and then.
Yeah, absolutely. Dr. Elizabeth Amato from the political science professor here at Gardner-Webb University. I think I got that right. I'm Jeff Powell. Thanks so much for tuning in. This is WGWG.org. Questions, comments, email them to us, info@WGWG.org.